We grew up in Redmond, a suburb of Seattle that did not just house Microsoft, it inhaled it. Our entire community was a sprawling campus of software engineers, developers, and tech executives, all chasing the next big thing. In the Johnson house, this obsession was concentrated. Technology was not just a career path, it was the family religion, and our home was its strictest church. My parents were both computer scientists, veterans of the startup boom in the 1990s. Their shared language was C++, their worship was efficiency, and their judgment was absolute. Dinner conversations were not about school plays or social lives. They were intense dissections of processing speeds, the elegance of new algorithms, and the flaws in someone else's code. Into this demanding world, my brother Marcus was born a prophet. From the time he was 10 years old, Marcus was the anointed one, the genius who saw the matrix. My father, finding him coding simple graphic patterns on our ancient desktop, was ecstatic. He declared Marcus the next Bill Gates. And from that single moment, the prophecy was set in stone, a foundation upon which our entire family dynamic was built. Then there was me, Maya. At 32 years old, I was a master of becoming invisible, fluent in the language of nodding along. I lived in the suffocating, cold shadow cast by my brother's recognized brilliance. Where Marcus saw complex systems, I saw human connection. My approach to technology felt almost artistic, something softer and less absolute. I was obsessed with how technology could help people, how it could make a lonely life feel less isolated, not just faster. This fundamental difference made me an alien at my own dinner table, an artist in a family of engineers. My parents and Marcus spoke a language of logic I understood intellectually, but could not feel in my bones. This created a deep internal pressure, a constant quiet feeling of being fundamentally flawed or lost. I felt a confusing, exhausting mix of admiration for my brother and a desperate clawing need to not be him. While they celebrated the cold perfection of the machine, I held onto a secret, almost shameful belief. I had an early, quiet love for what technology could do for the human heart. I just did not know how or if I would ever be allowed to build it. The favoritism was never spoken aloud, which only made it heavier. It was built into the architecture of our home. When Marcus was 12, my father converted half the garage into what he called the lab. It was a temperature-controlled space filled with high-end processors, multiple monitors, and networking gear that rivaled a small business. It was where Marcus was expected to build his empire. My achievements were treated as quaint hobbies. When I won the state debate championship, my father asked if it interfered with my math homework. When I took my first business management class in high school, my mother called it soft. Marcus quickly learned to weaponize our parents' values. His favorite dismissal, the one that always cut the deepest, was artist. In the Johnson family, calling someone an artist was not a compliment. It was an accusation of being unfocused, illogical, and fundamentally not serious. "Maya is the artist," he would say with a smirk when I tried to explain an idea. "She worries about the colors." He said it to dismiss me, and my parents allowed it, their silence a clear endorsement. The sting of this dismissal had a long history. I remember one middle school science fair with painful clarity. I must have been 10 years old. Marcus, already a prodigy at 12, had built a complex predictive algorithm that modeled traffic patterns. It was all raw code and data output on a black screen. My parents stood beside his booth for an hour, beaming with pride, engaging in technical questions with the judges. I was 2 aisles over. My project was a detailed hand-drawn series of storyboards illustrating a new, simpler interface for the school library's computer system, designed so even the youngest kids could find books without help. My father eventually came over. He glanced at my brightly colored boards, his eyes scanning them with a polite emptiness. "That's nice, Maya," he said, his mind clearly still back at Marcus's booth. "Very creative." He patted my head and walked away. Creative, the polite word for useless. The judge, another engineer, gave me an honorable mention for presentation. Marcus won first place. I remember standing alone at my booth, the vibrant colors of my design suddenly looking childish and stupid. It was not just about the blue ribbon. It was the ache of being fundamentally unseen. That night I understood. Marcus focused on the intricate, brutal complexity of the code. I was obsessed with the human solution it was supposed to provide. In our family, only one of those things mattered. My father's mother, Grandma Evelyn, was the family's sole exception. She was a retired librarian, a woman whose entire life had been dedicated to the power of stories, not statistics. Her mind was just as sharp as my parents', but it was sharp in a different way. It was an observant, empathetic intelligence. She was the only person in our family who never not once compared me to Marcus. She saw us as two completely different elements, fire and water both necessary. The world needs all kinds of minds, Maya. She told me often, her voice quiet but firm. It needs the people who build the engine, and it needs the people who design the map so we know where to drive it. Her house was my sanctuary. It was a small, cozy bungalow that smelled of old paper peppermint tea and the lemon polish she used on her oak furniture. While my parents' house was all cool tones, glass, and silent, sterile technology, Grandma's living room was warm. It was filled with overflowing bookshelves, worn velvet armchairs, and a constantly ticking grandfather clock that measured time in comforting, predictable beats. I would sit on her plush rug, feeling safe and completely seen. It was in that room, wrapped in one of her old quilts, that she would share her wisdom. One afternoon, after a particularly bruising comment from Marcus about my hobby classes, I confessed my frustration. Grandma Evelyn just nodded, taking a slow sip of her tea. "You know," she said, "you remind me of my Aunt Rose. Her brothers, my uncles, were engineers. Very important men building bridges and railroads. They thought Rose was frivolous because all she cared about was fabric and patterns." Grandma smiled, a little secret spark in her eye. Rose became a seamstress, just a humble seamstress. But while the brothers were busy being brilliant, Rose built the largest textile import business in the state. She understood what people wanted before they knew it themselves. Those brilliant men ended up working for her. She leaned forward and tapped my knee. "Never let someone else's definition of smart become your prison, Maya." She was the one who encouraged my interest in business. When my parents bought Marcus new processors, Grandma Evelyn gave me biographies of female CEOs and innovators who were not coders. She gave me books on design theory, user psychology, and market strategy. She saw the value in my ability to connect ideas to see the human being on the other side of the screen. It was her quiet, unwavering belief that first planted the seed in my mind. It was the idea that my path did not have to be a lesser version of my brother's. It could be something entirely different, something new, something that was entirely my own. The annual Easter dinner at Grandma Evelyn's house was the one non-negotiable event on the Johnson family calendar. It was a day of forced togetherness, a gathering of aunts, uncles, and cousins. Her house would be overflowing with the rich smells of roasted ham, macaroni and cheese, and sweet potato pie. The atmosphere was always loud, filled with laughter and the sound of children hunting for plastic eggs in the backyard. It was supposed to be warm, a celebration of family and rebirth. For me, it was a perfectly predictable stage for my own disappearance. Every single year, the performance was the same. We would sit at the large dining table, and after the blessing, my father would clear his throat. "So Marcus, tell everyone what you've been working on." And Marcus would perform. He would lean back confident and articulate, and spend the next 20 minutes detailing his latest triumphs at TechCore. He spoke in acronyms and complex technical jargon, his words flying over the heads of most of our relatives, but landing perfectly on our parents, who would nod with profound, satisfied pride. I would sit there, invisible, passing the green bean casserole, my own small victories in my business classes, dissolving before they even reached my lips. One year after a particularly draining dinner, where Marcus had announced his first major patent filing, I was helping Grandma Evelyn clear the table. She paused holding the heavy serving platter and looked at me with that unnervingly clear gaze of hers. "You know," she said quietly, her voice just for me, "you don't have to let it define you." Her words stayed with me long after the dishes were dried and the last relatives had gone home. Driving back, I processed the familiar sting of the evening. But as I analyzed the feeling, I realized it was not jealousy. Jealousy is a hot, sharp desire for what someone else has. I did not want Marcus's life. I did not want his sterile lab or his cold, precise code. What I felt was something different, a cold, hardening resolve. I was tired of being measured by their ruler. That night I understood I did not need to beat Marcus at his own game. I did not need to prove I was a better engineer. I needed to build an entirely different game, a new stadium where my skills, my empathy, and my understanding of people were the metrics that mattered. That Easter, the contrast was sharper than ever. The house was filled with the genuine warmth of a family holiday, but for me it was dominated by the cold, unspoken tension of their expectations. I smiled, I ate, I played the part. But inside, a quiet, powerful determination had finally taken root. I would build my own table. The inevitable split came our senior year of high school. Marcus, as prophesied, received a full scholarship to Stanford University for computer science. The acceptance letter was not just a letter, it was treated like a sacred text in our house. My father, a man I had rarely seen show overwhelming emotion, actually wept with pride. My mother was on the phone for 3 days straight, her voice triumphant, informing every distant relative that the next Bill Gates was officially on his way. His acceptance was not just a personal achievement, it was the family's coronation. It was the ultimate validation of their entire belief system. Then it was my turn. I announced I had chosen the University of Washington. The silence that followed was heavy and immediate. My mother's smile tightened. "Oh," she said. "That's wonderful, dear. It's so close to home." My father nodded slowly, processing the second, more painful piece of information. "And you're enrolling in the Foster School of Business," I said, my voice steady, "with a concentration in technology management." My father looked away, busying himself with a napkin. "Well," he said finally, "business is practical. You can always find a good job with a business degree. Practical." There was that word again, the same word he used for my science fair project, the polite cutting word for lesser. I remember the day Marcus left for Palo Alto. It was a procession. My parents drove him down in our packed SUV, treating the journey like a pilgrimage. It felt like they were sending a king off to his rightful kingdom. 4 years later, at my own graduation from the University of Washington, they sat in the 10th row of the stadium. They clapped politely when my name was called. They took the requisite photo afterward, my father glancing at his watch. The energy was not celebration. It was polite attendance. It was the punctuation at the end of a long sentence they had found fundamentally uninteresting. That polite, lukewarm applause cemented my resolve more than any of their overt criticism ever could. I would not just succeed. I would build something they could not even comprehend, let alone dismiss. I was not just surviving at UW, I was thriving. For the first time in my life, I was in an environment that valued my skills. I was no longer the artist. I was the translator. I was the strategist. My professors did not care that I could not write a recursive function from memory. They cared that I could build a business model around one. They cared that I could identify who would pay for the technology and why they would use it. I learned the languages of venture capital, market fit, user acquisition, and scalable architecture. I discovered that my ability to see the human solution, the empathy I had been taught to hide, was not a soft skill. It was a multi-million-dollar asset. I was finally learning how to value it. Marcus graduated from Stanford with high honors, which was no surprise to anyone. He did not just get a job, he was recruited by TechCore, the undisputed 800-pound gorilla of Seattle technology. His starting salary was a number in the high six figures, a figure my parents would repeat in hushed, reverent tones whenever they thought I was out of earshot. He moved into a sterile, glass-walled luxury apartment in downtown Seattle, and my parents were ecstatic. Their pride was a suffocating fog. Marcus had done it. He had fulfilled the prophecy. His success was their validation, the final, undeniable proof that their entire value system, their religion of code, was correct. My own start was quieter, less triumphant. I began my career as an associate product manager at a mid-sized software company. It was a role my family found confusing. I was not an engineer. I did not build. I was in their eyes just management. But I loved the work. My job was to be the translator. I lived in the chaotic, often hostile space between the brilliant, socially awkward developers and the frustrated real-world customers who had to use their products. I was the advocate for the user. I was the one who had to argue that the color of a button mattered because it guided the human eye, or that a feature was useless if it was hidden behind 5 menus. I found a deep, powerful satisfaction in taking a complex piece of technology and making it human. I tried to explain this to Marcus once over a rare one-on-one coffee. He listened with that familiar bored smirk stirring his espresso. "Oh, a PM," he said, the abbreviation dripping with disdain. "So you're the one who makes the PowerPoint decks and orders the pizza for the real engineers." I started to argue, to explain the market research, the user stories, the competitive analysis. He waved his hand, cutting me off. "It's fine, Maya," he said, his voice laced with that old casual cruelty. "It's a good support role. It's where they put the people who can't actually build anything." His words hit me like a physical blow. They found the deepest, oldest insecurity I had and twisted it. For months I wrestled with his definition. Am I just a support role? Was I just a glorified note-taker for the real geniuses? Was I just the artist, as he had always claimed, making things pretty while the important work happened elsewhere? The doubt was corrosive. But that pain forced me to look closer. I watched the engineers at my own company. They were brilliant, yes, but they were also completely lost. They would spend 6 months building a technically fascinating feature that not a single customer had ever asked for. They built powerful, beautiful engines that were not attached to a car. I was the one who went out and listened. I was the one who could identify the market's unspoken, desperate pain points. I was the one who could see the multi-million-dollar opportunity hidden inside a simple user complaint. My skill was not writing the code. My skill was knowing what code to write, why to write it, and who would pay for it. I realized my empathy, the very thing my family dismissed as soft, was not a weakness. It was a lethal business advantage. I was not a support role. I was the strategist. It was during this time that I met Daniel. He was a wonderful, stabilizing anchor in my life. He worked in finance, a traditional, predictable world of suits and spreadsheets. He was kind, he was handsome, and he loved me for me, not for my non-existent coding skills. But he was an outsider. He did not understand the obsessive, all-consuming nature of the tech world, and he certainly did not understand the deep, complex toxicity of my family. "They're your parents, Maya," he would say gently after a tense Sunday dinner. "They love you. Marcus just sounds like a typical competitive brother. I think you're being too sensitive." His inability to see the true dynamics, his rational, loving dismissal of my pain, made me feel even more alone in my ambition. I knew as I leaned into his solid, comforting presence that this professional battle was one I would have to fight and win by myself. The turning point came not in an office, but at a sprawling, impersonal tech conference in Las Vegas. I was there on my company's dime, sitting through endless panels of self-important male engineers, congratulating each other on minor architectural tweaks. I felt the old familiar frustration rising. They were all discussing how to build, but no one was asking why. No one was talking about the human being who was forced to navigate their monstrous, counterintuitive software every single day. After a particularly agonizing panel on leveraging synergistic back-end frameworks, I escaped to the hotel bar. I sat alone nursing a $5 water that cost $15 and idly scrolling through my notes. "What a complete waste of time," a sharp voice said next to me. I looked up. A black woman with intelligent, impatient eyes and a laptop covered in developer stickers was sitting down 2 stools over. She was also looking at the conference schedule with open disgust. "They haven't solved a single real-world problem in 3 days," she added, catching my eye. Her name was Chloe Davis. She was a senior developer, a genuine brilliant coder, but one who, like me, was deeply frustrated. We started talking. It was not a polite networking chat. It was a rapid-fire visceral venting session. We shared our mutual hatred for the state of enterprise software. "It's arrogant," I said, the words pouring out of me. "It's built by geniuses like my brother who don't care that the average person needs a 400-page manual just to find the print button." Chloe laughed, a real sharp bark of a laugh. "And the integration," she said, leaning in. "It's a joke. You have one system for sales, one for inventory, one for HR, and none of them speak the same language. It's insane." The energy between us was immediate and electric. It was the first time I had ever met a builder who spoke my user language. We moved to a quieter booth, the noise of the bar fading away. The conversation became a torrent. We forgot about the conference, about our jobs. I grabbed a stack of cocktail napkins. "Okay, look," I said, pulling out a pen. "The problem isn't the features. The problem is the connection." I started sketching a diagram. I drew the user in the center, not the database. I drew lines showing how a single elegant interface could pull data from every silo, presenting it in one simple, intuitive dashboard. Chloe watched my pen, her eyes intense. Then she grabbed a napkin herself. "You're talking about a unified platform," she said, her voice dropping with seriousness. "Not just a new tool, but a whole new ecosystem. The back end would have to be incredibly robust." She started sketching an architecture, her lines clean and confident, showing how APIs could link the legacy systems. My why was meeting her how in real time on a flimsy piece of paper. We identified the massive gaping hole in the market. Everyone was building powerful, ugly silos. TechCore, my brother's company, was the king of them. They were dinosaurs, proud of their size, completely unaware of the asteroid. The opportunity was not to build a better silo. It was to build the one beautiful, simple, powerful layer that connected them all. We sat back looking at the dozen napkins covered in ink. It was a complete business plan. "This is it, isn't it?" I whispered, not as a question. "This is the billion-dollar idea." Chloe just nodded, her expression grimly determined. "So," she said, "when do we start?" We agreed that night we would build it in secret, on nights, on weekends. We would pour our savings into it, not telling a single soul, until we had a prototype that could not be denied. Our secret project, the one born on cocktail napkins, began to devour my life. The nights of quiet brainstorming turned into frantic, whispered conference calls with Chloe after midnight, and entire weekends vanished into a blur of market research and code iteration. Daniel, my anchor, felt the shift. His world of finance was built on predictable 9-to-5 schedules and quarterly reports. My new life was chaotic, all-consuming and clandestine. "Maya, you're never home anymore," he said one night, his voice laced with a frustration I had not heard before. "You're glued to that laptop, and when I ask what you're working on, you just say work. What is this big secret?" He pressed the issue later that week. "Why can't you just tell your family you're doing well? It is like you are ashamed of it." That one word, ashamed, struck a deep, discordant nerve. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to share the electric thrill of building something from absolute nothing, the white-hot terror of the financial risk, the sheer scale of the ambition. But I could not. A lifetime of my family's dismissals had built a fortress around me. I vividly remembered the year I got my first significant bonus as a product manager, a solid $5,000. I had been so proud. When I told my parents, my father just nodded his eyes, not even leaving the newspaper. "That's nice," he said, his voice flat. But did you hear Marcus just optimized a single query that's saving TechCore more than that every single day? That memory was my shield. Failure, if I failed now, would be a public spectacle. It would be the final unbearable confirmation of my status as the artist. But in a strange, toxic way, premature success felt just as dangerous. If I told them they would pick it apart, patronize me, or worse, Marcus would offer his help. I needed to arrive fully formed. Undeniable. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. He could not see the complex invisible battlefield I was navigating. "I just worry, Maya," he said, his tone softening to one of genuine concern, which was almost worse. "This project of yours, it feels so unstable. Marcus has a real job, a real stable career path at TechCore. You had that. You are throwing it away for a secret. I just do not get it." He was comparing me to Marcus. Not cruelly like my family, but he was still using my brother's real job as the benchmark for stability. It was a new painful layer of isolation. I could not make him understand, so I deflected. "It's just a complex consulting gig, babe," I said, forcing a weary smile. "It's just taking up more time than I thought. It will calm down soon." I kept the business plan locked away. For 6 months, our lives were a carefully constructed lie. Every spare minute, every weekend, every ounce of mental energy was poured into the business plan. It was not a student project. It was a 100-page ironclad case for war filled with brutal market analysis, detailed user personas, and aggressive 5-year projections. Chloe, in parallel, built a prototype that was not just functional, it was beautiful. It was fast, intuitive, and it worked. We used our saved vacation days to fly to Sand Hill Road for a single, impossible meeting with a top-tier venture capital firm. We sat in a sterile glass-walled conference room. 4 partners, all men, sat across from us, their faces bored and unreadable. They expected to dismiss us in 10 minutes. Then I started to talk. I did not talk about code. I talked about pain. I described the daily soul-crushing frustration of the average employee fighting a system that was built to confuse them. I painted a picture of billions of dollars lost in wasted productivity and employee turnover. Then Chloe plugged in her laptop. She did not talk. She just ran the prototype. She showed them in real time how our platform could integrate 3 different legacy systems in under 60 seconds. The VCs leaned forward. Their boredom vanished. They saw the potential. They saw the money. The email with the term sheet arrived 3 days later. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open it. $500,000. Seed funding. The number felt unreal, like a typo. It was the starting gun I had both prayed for and dreaded. That night I called Chloe, my voice a strained whisper. "Chloe, I feel sick. 500,000, this is real. This means quitting. My health insurance, my 401k. What am I going to tell Daniel?" Chloe's voice was perfectly calm, sharp as steel. "It was always real, Maya. The money just makes it official." I paced my living room, my heart hammering. "My family, Chloe. They'll think I'm insane. Marcus will say I told you so when it fails." There was a long silence. "And," Chloe's voice was hard, "are you going to let your brother's imaginary "I told you so" kill a multi-million-dollar company? Are you going to live in that shadow for the rest of your life? I know this tech. You know this market. We are not asking for their permission. I am handing in my notice tomorrow morning. Are you with me or not?" Her words cut through the panic. She was right. This was the moment. The next morning, I sent the resignation email to my boss. It was the single most terrifying, exhilarating click of my life. 2 weeks later, Maya Johnson and Chloe Davis signed the incorporation papers and a lease on a tiny, windowless office above a pizza shop. ConnectWise Solutions was born. Our mission was simple and revolutionary: to stop selling software to businesses and start designing it for people. Telling my family was exactly as brutal as I had anticipated. I did it over a casual Sunday dinner, framing it as a minor career shift. I've decided to leave my job, I said calmly, passing the potatoes. I'm going to be doing some consulting. My mother dropped her fork. Leave, Maya, you had stability. You had benefits. For consulting. My father looked genuinely bewildered, as if I had just announced I was joining the circus. Marcus, predictable as ever, just laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was a sharp, barking sound of derision. Consulting, he repeated, savoring the word. You mean unemployed? Let me guess, it's one of your little passion projects. I kept my voice even. It's a small company I've started with a partner. Marcus leaned back, his face a mask of patronizing pity. Maya, 90% of all tech startups fail within the first year. 90%. You know that, right? This isn't just making PowerPoint decks for other people anymore. This is real money, real risk. I just shrugged, intentionally downplaying everything. It's a small venture, Marcus, a niche market. I never mentioned the $500,000 in seed funding. I let them believe I was a fool playing in a sandbox. Our sandbox was a tiny, cramped office above a pizza shop that perpetually smelled of garlic and old carpet. We hired our first 2 employees, a young, brilliant back-end engineer and a customer support specialist who believed in our mission. Chloe was the heart of the engine room, a relentless coding machine who seemed to subsist on cold pizza and sheer willpower. I was the face. I was on the road in endless meetings, giving demo after demo to skeptical, bored IT managers. Those first 6 months were a blur of exhilarating terror. We were burning through our seed money at a terrifying rate. The stress was a physical weight, a constant tightness in my chest. Our whiteboards were a chaotic mess of diagrams, customer feedback, and desperate sales pipelines. I lived on lukewarm coffee and the adrenaline of the chase. There were nights I would get back to the office at 10, finding Chloe asleep on a beanbag chair, the glow of her code still active on the monitors. We were exhausted, we were terrified, and we had never been happier. It was a pure, focused, desperate fight for survival. Penetrating the market was harder than I ever imagined. We were unknowns, 2 women trying to sell a new concept to an old, cynical industry. We already have a solution, they would say. This is too disruptive. This looks too simple. Then we got a meeting with a regional healthcare provider. Their system was a 20-year-old nightmare, a patchwork of failing databases that was actively frustrating their nurses and costing them millions. I went into that meeting and I did not sell software. I sold empathy. I described in detail the pain of their users because I had spent a week just listening to them. I showed them how our platform would give them back thousands of hours. I watched the CEO's face change from skepticism to desperate hope. They signed. It was our first 6-figure contract. I remember walking out of that building and sitting in my car, my hands shaking too hard to start the engine. I called Chloe and just sobbed for a full minute before I could get the words out. We got it. We are in. That night, we did not celebrate with champagne. We ordered 2 large pizzas to the office and worked until 2 in the morning mapping out the implementation plan. By the end of our first year, we had 12 employees. We were not just surviving. We were 1 contract away from being profitable. We were real. Even as we grew, my secrecy with my family remained absolute. My parents still thought I was running a small consulting gig, and Marcus referred to me as on sabbatical. Chloe found my secrecy baffling. Maya, we're almost profitable, she argued one night as we were locking up the office. We have 12 employees. This isn't a hobby. Why are you still letting them treat you like a child? I paused the key in the lock, the smell of garlic from the pizza shop wafting up. Because Chloe, I said, my voice quiet but fierce, this is the one thing in my life that is completely mine. I want to succeed or I want to fail entirely on my own terms. I don't want their pity if I fail. And I damn well don't want their advice or patronizing surprise if I succeed. It has to be done before they can touch it. Chloe did not understand the lifetime of context behind that decision, but she respected it. There was one exception, Grandma Evelyn. I went to her house alone one Saturday afternoon carrying a folder. She had her usual peppermint tea waiting for me. We sat in her warm, quiet living room, the grandfather clock ticking steadily. "You look different, Maya," she said, peering at me over her glasses. "You look tired, but you also look dangerous. What have you been building in that little office?" So I told her. I told her everything. I laid out the napkin sketches, the business plan, the user interface mock-ups. I told her about Chloe, about the all-night coding sessions, the brutal rejections, and the massive healthcare contract. I told her about the $500,000 in seed funding. I finally confessed the true scale of my ambition. She listened, her hands folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she did not just congratulate me. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "That's a lovely story," she said. "Now tell me about the business. Who is your real customer? The executive who signs the check, or the nurse who uses the keyboard? How do you make money, a subscription or a per-seat license?" She asked about our customer acquisition cost, our burn rate, our 5-year plan to defend against competitors like TechCore. She had the mind of a venture capitalist hidden inside a librarian. She saw everything just like her Aunt Rose. After a long, thoughtful silence, she nodded. "It's a very, very smart model, Maya. You're not selling software. You're selling efficiency. You're selling time." She got up, went to her old wooden writing desk, and pulled out a checkbook. "I want to invest," she said as calmly as if offering me a cookie. "Ba tin vào chao," she said in Vietnamese, a rare slip into the language of her own childhood. "I believe in you. But I also, as Rose would say, recognize a good investment when I see one." She wrote a check for $25,000. My eyes filled with tears. It was not the money. It was the investment. It was the first time anyone in my family had ever financially, professionally, and unequivocally backed me over Marcus. It was the ultimate validation. I accepted it, my hand shaking. "Does this mean I should tell them?" I asked. Grandma Evelyn put the check in my hand and folded my fingers over it. "Absolutely not," she said, a mischievous spark in her eye. "You keep building. Let them have their stories. Some lessons, especially for the very proud, must be learned all at once through pure, undeniable surprise." Our second year was a controlled explosion. The market was not just ready for our product, it was starving for it. Our initial healthcare contract became a flagship case study, and suddenly the floodgates opened. We were no longer two women above a pizza shop. We were a recognized disruptive force. The same venture capital firms that had ignored our initial emails were now competing to lead our next round. We closed our Series A. It was $10 million at a valuation of $40 million. The numbers were abstract, almost comical in their scale. The reality was immediate and concrete. We needed space. We signed a lease on an entire floor in a new glass and steel building. It was only after the ink was dry that I realized the crushing, beautiful irony. Our new headquarters was 3 blocks down the street from the massive, imposing campus of TechCore. We expanded our team to 25 employees. We hired a dedicated sales force, a head of customer success, and a phalanx of new engineers. Our tiny garlic-scented office was replaced by a sprawling open floor plan. It was loud, chaotic, and brilliant, a constant hum of debate, collaboration, and the relentless sound of keyboards building our shared vision. Then TechCrunch called. They wanted to feature us. The article ran on a Tuesday with a headline that made my hands shake: "The Integration Disruptors, How ConnectWise is Making the Old Guard Obsolete." It was a massive public validation. I immediately blocked the TechCrunch website on my parents' home network, a firewall trick Marcus himself had taught me years ago. I set up email filters to send any message containing the words ConnectWise or TechCrunch from my family members directly into a trash folder I would never read. My success was growing, but so was the complexity of my secrecy. I would often stand by the floor-to-ceiling windows of our new office, coffee in hand, and just watch my team. I felt a surge of pride so intense it was almost painful. This was real. These 25 brilliant people chose to be here. They believed in my vision. But then I would look down the street at the blue glass towers of TechCore looming against the Seattle sky. That was the empire. That was what my family understood as real tech. The old doubt, that cold voice that whispered I was just the artist, was still there. My success still felt fragile, as if one dismissive comment from my father could undo it all. That lingering fear began to change at an enterprise architecture summit 6 months later. I was not there to speak, I was there for reconnaissance. I sat in the back of panel discussions and I listened. The rumors were just whispers at first in the coffee line between sessions. TechCore is bleeding customers, one chief technology officer muttered to another. Their core architecture is a fossil. It's monolithic. They can't integrate with any modern cloud service. Another executive nodded, his face grim. We're one of their biggest accounts. We are actively looking to jump ship. Their system is slow, it's obsolete, and it's costing us a fortune. My heart began to hammer a slow, steady beat against my ribs. This was not just industry gossip. This was a strategic opening. I went back to my hotel room that night and I did not sleep. I dove deep. I used our company's expensive access to industry analysis reports. I scoured technical forums. I cross-referenced client complaint boards and read between the lines of their latest financial statements. It was all true. All. TechCore, the untouchable fortress where my brother was king, was rotting from the inside out. They were a dinosaur, proud of their size, completely oblivious to the asteroid. And we were the asteroid. The call came on a Tuesday morning. It was from Jasmine, our head of engineering. She was one of our first and most critical hires, an architectural genius Chloe and I had spent 3 months convincing to leave her secure job at a major firm. Her voice on the phone was confused, almost amused. "Hey, Maya," she said. "I just got a really weird message on LinkedIn. It's from a VP of engineering at TechCore, a guy named Marcus Johnson." My blood went ice cold in an instant. I gripped the edge of my desk, my knuckles turning white. "Marcus Johnson." I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "What did he want?" "He wants to have coffee," Jasmine replied. "He said he has been following my work and is extremely impressed with my profile. He said TechCore is building an elite skunkworks team to rebuild their core platform and he's looking for a new lead. It's a poaching attempt, Maya, a very aggressive one." I closed my eyes, the sheer blinding arrogance of it taking my breath away. He was poaching. He was actively trying to gut my engineering leadership. Of course, he had no idea it was my company. To him, ConnectWise was just another smaller fish in the Seattle pond, a competitor with a talented engineer he could steal. His first instinct was not to build his own talent, but to take someone else's, to weaken a competitor, to strengthen his own failing kingdom. My shock quickly curdled into a cold, clear, clarifying anger. This was not the old familiar family dynamic. This was not a patronizing joke about me being an artist. This was a professional predatory attack. It was unethical, it was underhanded, and it proved that he was still the same person he had always been. This single casual attempt to poach my best employee erased any lingering foolish guilt I had about the acquisition. This was no longer just a smart strategic business move. It was now a personal, absolute necessity. I walked straight into Chloe's office and shut the door behind me. "We have a problem," I said. I told her exactly what Marcus had done. Chloe's eyes widened, then narrowed into furious slits. "That arrogant, self-righteous..." She took a visibly deep breath to calm herself. "What do you want to do? Do you want to call him? Do you want me to call him? I will happily tell him exactly where he can file his job offer." The temptation was overwhelming. I had a sudden, vivid fantasy of calling him, of unleashing 20 years of fury, of hearing the satisfying sound of his suffocating pride collapsing when he finally realized who he had just tried to rob. But I shook my head, the hot anger receding, replaced by ice-cold strategy. "No, absolutely not," I said. "If we react, if I call him, he'll know something is wrong. He'll get suspicious, he'll connect the dots, he'll know we're a threat." I started pacing her office. We are weeks away from our Series B. If he tells my parents if the word gets out that we're his direct competitor before we are ready to make our move, it could spook our new investors. It could ruin everything. Chloe nodded slowly, seeing the grim logic. So we do nothing. We just let him try to poach our people. We do nothing. I confirmed. For now, tell Jasmine to politely decline. Tell her she's deeply committed to her current projects and not on the market. But this, Chloe, this changes things for me. Chloe looked at me, a new understanding in her eyes. This makes the acquisition personal, doesn't it? It makes it critical, I replied. He just proved he's a reckless liability. We aren't just buying a company anymore, Chloe. We're containing a threat. 6 months after Marcus's poaching attempt, we closed our Series B. The number was staggering, $60 million at a new valuation of $200 million. ConnectWise was no longer just a disruptor. We were now a dominant, aggressive market force. This new capital was not for operations, it was a war chest intended for strategic acquisitions. At the first board meeting after the close, our lead investor laid out the new strategy. It's time to consolidate, he said. We need to acquire competitors and obsolete technologies and migrate their massive customer lists to our platform. A list of potential targets appeared on the main screen. Halfway down, I saw it. Tech Core. My heart hammered against my ribs, a single hard beat. This one, the investor said, pointing to my brother's company. They are the biggest dinosaur. They are obsolete, hemorrhaging clients and stuck with a monolithic architecture. But they are deeply entrenched. We buy them for their client lists, sunset their old tech, and convert their entire user base. The room was silent. I knew I had to speak. I need to disclose a conflict of interest, I said. My voice was steady cold. My brother Marcus Johnson is the vice president of engineering at TechCore. The board members looked at me surprised but unconcerned. I felt a dizzying, sharp thrill of vindication. It was the ultimate poetic justice. But underneath that was a cold, sinking dread of the personal chaos this would unleash. I took a breath, forcing my face into a mask of professional neutrality. To be clear, I continued, this changes nothing about my recommendation. From a purely strategic standpoint, TechCore is the perfect target. Their tech is a mess, their brand is dying, and their customers are ours for the taking. This is a business decision, not a personal one. The board nodded, accepting my disclosure. We voted to begin the due diligence. But the tech and finance worlds are small. Rumors began to leak that ConnectWise was on the hunt for a major 9-figure acquisition. Daniel heard the whispers through his own circles. He confronted me that weekend, his face etched with a new, urgent anxiety. Maya, I am hearing things, he said, that your little company is about to buy someone big. You cannot keep this secret anymore. It is getting out of control. I am begging you, go to your parents. Reconcile with Marcus. Tell them what you have built before they read about it in the news. What will happen if they find out this way, Maya? What will that do to them? What will it do to us? The final board vote was unanimous. The acquisition of TechCore as part of our larger strategic consolidation was approved. The final confidential offer letter was sent to the TechCore board on the Wednesday before Easter weekend. Their acceptance signaling the end of their independence came through on Thursday night. The deal was done. The press release was scheduled to go out on Monday morning, a public execution. The timing was brutal, and it was perfect. My first call was not to my leadership team. It was to Grandma Evelyn. I drove to her house that Friday morning, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I sat in her warm kitchen, the smell of peppermint tea filling the air. Grandma, I said, my voice low and steady. I need to tell you something before Sunday. The deal is done. ConnectWise is acquiring TechCore. Grandma Evelyn did not look surprised. She simply took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea. A slow smile, the one I remembered from the story about Aunt Rose, spread across her face. Oh my, she said, her eyes twinkling with a bright, dangerous light. Well, that certainly changes the menu. Easter dinner is going to be very, very interesting this year, Maya. I am so glad I invested. Driving home, my confidence from the boardroom evaporated. It was replaced by a churning, sickening mix of anxiety and a wild, almost giddy anticipation. This was it. 3 years of secrecy. 32 years of being the artist, the support role, the soft one. The lie was about to end, not with a quiet confession, but with a public, undeniable explosion. I felt a profound, sinking dread at the thought of the chaos I was about to unleash on our family's holiday. I dreaded the inevitable messy fallout, the accusations, the tears, the rage. But underneath that dread was a sharp electric thrill I was almost ashamed to admit. I wanted to see his face. I wanted to see the moment the prophecy collapsed. I wanted to see the look in my father's eyes when he realized the practical business degree had just swallowed the genius engineering one. My hands were shaking. I pulled over to the side of the road and called Chloe. She picked up on the first ring. "It's done," I whispered into the phone, my voice trembling. "The deal is final. The dinner is on Sunday. Chloe, I think I'm going to be sick. It's his whole career. It's my whole family." Chloe's voice was the steel anchor I needed. There was no sympathy in it, only strength. "What are you talking about?" she said, her voice sharp and clear. "You are not doing this to your family. You are doing this for our company. This is not personal. It is business." She paused, letting the words land. "Those were your exact words, Maya. The ones you used to convince the board. Do not you dare forget them now." I pulled up to Grandma Evelyn's house on Sunday morning, my car rolling over the same cracked driveway I had known my entire life. I took a deep, steadying breath before getting out. Inside the scene was a perfect, unchanging tableau of every Easter I had ever known. The air was thick with the rich smells of ham and baking bread. My younger cousins, now teenagers, were half-heartedly hunting for plastic eggs in the backyard, their faces buried in their phones. Aunts and uncles I saw twice a year were crowded in the living room, their laughter loud and familiar. It was all so normal, so predictable, that the massive life-altering secret I was carrying felt like a physical object hidden under my coat. I was barely in the door before my mother spotted me. She rushed over, her face a mask of social cheer. "Maya, darling, you made it! How is that little consulting thing you're doing? Is it keeping you busy?" Before I could even form a polite, evasive answer, my father was beside her. His chest puffed out with a pride so bright it was almost vibrating. "Maya, did you hear the news? You will not believe it." "What news, Dad?" I asked, already knowing. "Your brother," he beamed, his voice booming over the party noise. "Marcus just got his promotion. It is official. Vice President of Engineering at TechCore. Can you imagine, Vice President? We are just so proud. All that hard work, the Stanford degree, it all paid off. A real powerful career. He is an executive now." I felt a hysterical bubble of laughter rise in my throat and had to swallow it down with physical force. It was the single most absurd, painfully ironic moment of my entire life. Vice President of Engineering. This title, which they presented like a crown jewel, was a middle management position. It was a role that in precisely 36 hours, when the press release went public, would be reporting up to my new organizational chart. This man, this executive, was now officially my employee. I pictured Marcus in all his arrogance sitting in a mandatory human resources integration meeting run by my team. The vision was so overwhelming, so perfectly brutally funny, that I had to cough to cover the smile that was fighting to break free. "Wow," I managed to say, my voice sounding strained and thin. That's incredible news, Dad. You must be so thrilled." "We are," my mother gushed, already looking past me to find someone more important to tell. "He'll be here any minute. Oh, you must go congratulate him." "I will," I said, making my escape. "I'm just going to go see if Grandma needs help in the kitchen." I pushed through the swinging door into the sudden relative quiet. Grandma Evelyn was standing at the counter, calmly stirring a pot of gravy, the picture of holiday peace. She did not look up, but as I entered, a small smile played on her lips. "Well," she whispered, her voice a low conspiratorial rumble just for me. "Hello, dear. How is my secret shark-owning entrepreneur enjoying the party? I hear the vice president is going to make an appearance." I leaned against the counter, the shared explosive secret hanging between us in the warm, quiet air. Marcus finally made his entrance, predictably late, sweeping into the living room as if expecting applause. On his arm was his new girlfriend, Simone. My heart sank a little. Unlike his previous girlfriends, who were usually chosen for their decorative qualities, this woman had an aura of sharp, undeniable intelligence. Marcus, in his effort to introduce her, made this painfully clear. "Everyone," he announced. "This is Simone. She just finished her PhD in machine learning from Carnegie Mellon. So you know she actually understands what I do." He then spotted me, his gaze sweeping over me with casual indifference. "Oh, hey, Maya. Simone, this is my little sister Maya." He gestured vaguely in my direction. "She runs what is it you call it again, Maya? Some kind of user experience, consulting shop? She helps companies pick out button colors." My aunts and uncles chuckled politely. The familiar hot flush of humiliation rose in my neck, but I pushed it down. I met his gaze with the calm, level stare. "Hello, Simone," I said, my voice perfectly even. "It's a pleasure to meet you. And Marcus, it's an integration platform. We build enterprise software." Marcus waved his hand, a gesture of complete bored dismissal. Right. Enterprise. Anyway," he said, turning his back to me to address the entire room. "You guys will not believe the mess I've been cleaning up at TechCore. It is a complete disaster." As he launched into his monologue, my eyes met Simone's for a brief second. I saw something flicker in her expression. It was not pity, it was recognition. She had registered my correction. Integration platform, enterprise software. She knew exactly what those words meant. She was a computer scientist. She understood that what I did was not button colors. She looked at me with a sudden sharp curiosity and then quickly looked away, her attention forced back to Marcus, who was now pacing in front of the fireplace in full performance mode. "I mean, seriously," Marcus continued, oblivious. "The core architecture I inherited was a joke. It was monolithic, totally archaic. I've spent the last 6 months personally re-architecting the entire kernel. We're talking a total rewrite." He was using his big, impressive engineering words, the ones that always made my parents nod in awe. He conveniently failed to mention the quarterly losses. He failed to mention the mass exodus of clients. He failed to mention that his rewrite was a desperate failing attempt to patch a sinking ship. "I've been telling the board for a year," he said, taking a dramatic sip of his drink. "You cannot just let anyone run a real tech company. You need visionaries. You need people who actually build." His eyes flicked to me again just for a second to make sure the insult landed. It did, but this time it landed on armor. We sat down at the heavy oak table, the same table that had hosted decades of these performances. And as always, Marcus began his show. He held the entire table hostage, dominating the conversation with a dense, impenetrable fog of technical jargon. He explained his new role, the VP of Engineering, with a self-satisfied air, as if he had single-handedly invented the concept of software. "The problem," he declared, gesturing with his wine glass, "is that the old guard just didn't understand scale. They were amateurs. I am currently in the middle of a complete overhaul of our entire core architecture. It is a massive, massive undertaking." He looked directly at me, then his eyes sharp and dismissive. "It is not for the faint of heart. Not everyone can handle a real career in this industry, Maya. You have to be willing to do the hard, complex work, not just the fun, creative stuff." I just took a quiet bite of my ham. I felt a strange, almost serene calm settle over me. It was the calm of holding all the cards. I knew the truth. Our due diligence, the one my team had just completed, had painted a very different picture. His massive overhaul was a notorious buggy internal project that was 2 years behind schedule and had cost millions. It was vaporware. It was a complete failure. Our technical auditors had flagged it as a primary liability, a key reason TechCore's board was so desperate to sell, and a key reason our final offer was so low. His great complex work, the very thing he was using to belittle me, was one of the primary reasons he no longer had a company. Grandma Evelyn let the silence hang for a moment. Then she turned to me, her voice deliberately light. "Well, that does sound very complicated, Marcus. Maya, dear, you have been so quiet. How is your little company doing? You moved to a new office, did not you?" Before I could answer, Marcus let out that sharp, barking laugh. "Oh, ConnectWise, it's fine. It's middleware." He said the word like it was something he had stepped in. "It's glue. It just sticks other people's real programs together. It's a useful little niche, I suppose." I placed my fork down very gently. "We're actually a unified integration platform. Marcus," I said, my voice clear and carrying easily across the table. "We do not just connect systems. Our innovation is a single intuitive interface that uses machine learning to anticipate user workflow. We've proven it can increase enterprise productivity by over 30%. Simone's head, the PhD from Carnegie Mellon, snapped in my direction. Her eyes widened. She knew exactly what I had just said. Marcus just scoffed, rolling his eyes. He was losing his audience. "Oh, please, increase productivity. Every startup in Seattle says that. It's meaningless marketing fluff." "Oh dear," Grandma Evelyn said, her voice full of a sudden sweet innocence. She looked at me, her eyes bright. "Is that why your company just bought his company?" The silence that fell was not just a lack of sound. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air from the room. My uncle's fork halfway to his mouth froze. My mother, who had been smiling, just stared, the expression locked on her face. Simone's jaw literally dropped. Marcus's face went through 3 distinct, rapid phases. First, blank, confused laughter. Second, pale, sickening shock. Third, a deep, blotchy, furious red. "What?" He choked out the word, barely audible. "What did you just say?" All eyes turned to me. I did not look at Marcus. I looked at my grandmother and I smiled. Then I turned to my brother. "Yes," I said, my voice as calm and clear as a bell. ConnectWise Solutions has acquired TechCore. The deal was finalized on Thursday. The press release goes out tomorrow morning. You're lying," my father stammered, looking wildly between me and Marcus. "Maya, that's not possible. Marcus is a vice president." "I'm not lying," I said. "We closed our Series B round 2 months ago. Our current valuation is $500 million. The room exploded. Marcus shot to his feet, his chair screeching violently on the wooden floor. "You did this," he shouted, his voice cracking with a rage so pure it was almost childish. "You did this to humiliate me, my own sister." My mother burst into tears, a high, thin wail of pure confusion. "Maya, what are you talking about? 500? Why would you hide that?" Grandma Evelyn just took another delicate sip of her tea. "I thought it was a wonderful investment, Eleanor," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "My $25,000 is doing very, very well." The room descended into a storm of questions, a torrent of disbelief and accusations, all of it aimed right at me. The performance was finally over. Marcus shoved his chair back and stormed out of the dining room. The front door slammed shut, its rattling glass vibrating through the entire house, leaving a stunned, echoing silence in his wake. My mother started to sob. "Marcus, wait!" My father just sat there, his face ashen, looking at me as if I were a complete stranger. I took a deep breath, stood up from the table, and quietly followed my brother outside. I found him on the front porch, the same porch where we had waited for the school bus, and hidden from thunderstorms. It was our childhood's neutral territory. He was not shouting now. He was gripping the wooden porch railing so tightly his knuckles were white, his shoulders shaking, staring out into the dark yard. "You planned this," He bit out, his voice thick with a toxic mix of rage and shame. You waited for Easter. You waited for my promotion. You did this just to publicly, absolutely humiliate me. I stood a few feet away, leaning against a support beam. No, Marcus, I said, my voice quiet but not apologetic. I did not. The deal finalized on Thursday. The press release is Monday. Easter was just unfortunate timing. Unfortunate, he spat, whirling around to face me. You call this unfortunate? You're buying my company, Maya. You're buying my career. I'm buying a failing asset, Marcus, I said, my voice hardening. It was a rational business decision. Your company's architecture is obsolete. It's hemorrhaging clients. It was a strategic acquisition, nothing more. Irrational? He stopped, his rage faltering, replaced by a raw, painful confusion. He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in our lives. I don't understand, he whispered. You're the artist. You do the soft stuff. I was never just the artist. I cut him off, the old sting of the word giving me strength. That's just what you and Mom and Dad needed me to be. You see code. I see the entire system. I see the market. I see the user. I see the why. You build the engine. I build the car, draw the map, and sell the ticket. They are not opposed, Marcus. They are complementary. You just never ever respected my side of the equation. He was silent, the new reality visibly warring with 30 years of ingrained superiority. You don't even see the whole board, Marcus. I continued, my voice firm. You're a brilliant engineer, but you're a terrible strategist. 3 months ago you tried to poach my head of engineering, Jasmine. You sent her a message on LinkedIn. His face went pale. What I don't... You tried to gut my company to save yours without even knowing it was my company. That, Marcus, is why I just bought you. Because you're playing checkers and I'm playing chess. You're not a visionary, you're just a liability. He had no answer. He just stared at me, his world completely undone. The screen door creaked open behind us. It was Simone. She walked past me and stood next to Marcus, her face a complex mix of emotions. I told you, Marcus, she said, her voice quiet but sharp. I told you ConnectWise was the one to watch. I've been following their platform for a year. Their Series B announcement was legendary in my circles. She turned and looked at me, her eyes filled with a stunning professional admiration. Your work on intuitive workflow integration, it's brilliant, Maya, truly. It's what I wrote my thesis on. Marcus looked at Simone, then at me, then back at Simone. The final devastating blow had not come from me. It had come from the very person he had brought to validate his own genius. He crumpled, not physically, but internally. His shoulders slumped, the rage gone, replaced by a hollow, vacant shock. He had just been checkmated. I walked back inside, leaving Marcus and Simone on the porch. The dining room was utterly silent. My aunts and uncles, who had been shouting and accusing moments before, were now just staring at their plates. The entire comfortable, predictable axis of our family had just been broken, and no one knew what to say. The rest of the meal was a surreal pantomime. People ate, but no one tasted anything. The power once held so firmly by Marcus and my father had not just shifted. It had evaporated from their side of the table and reappeared solid and heavy in my hands. My uncle, the one who always asked Marcus about his stock options, cleared his throat. His voice was suddenly laced with a new oily respect. So, Maya, he said, this, ConnectWise, you are saying it is really worth 500 million. Suddenly I was the one they had questions for. Suddenly my career was the interesting one. My answers were the only ones that mattered. My parents, however, were silent. They looked wrecked. They were trapped in a painful, visible collision of emotions. I could see the shame warring with a new, hesitant pride. I could see the profound, agonizing regret of having bet on the wrong child for 32 years. After the table was cleared, my mother cornered me by the kitchen sink. My father stood beside her, looking lost. Maya, why? My mother whispered, her eyes red. Why would you not tell us all this time? We thought you were struggling. Why would you hide this from your own family?" I looked at them, not with anger, but with a new, sad clarity. "Because I could not have built it if I had told you." I said, my voice quiet, but unyielding. I needed to do it without the comparisons. I needed to do it without Dad asking me why my valuation was not as high as Marcus's salary. I needed one thing in my life that was not measured against him by you. I needed to be left alone so I could either fail or succeed, but it had to be mine. My mother had no answer to that. She just looked down, the full weight of her bias finally crushing her. Grandma Evelyn swooped in, then carrying a stack of dessert plates. "Well," she announced, her voice bright and cheerful, "who wants a slice of pie, Maya dear? Come tell me what you plan to do with that dreadful old TechCore logo." The spell was broken, but the change was permanent. The old world was gone. The Monday morning press release sent an earthquake through the Seattle tech community. My phone did not just buzz, it became a useless vibrating brick of nonstop notifications. Family members I had not heard from in 10 years were suddenly sending frantic, fawning text messages. Old college classmates, tech reporters, and rival CEOs were all flooding my inbox. The secret was not just out. It was the biggest tech story of the quarter. About a week later, my executive assistant buzzed my office. "Ms. Johnson," she said, her voice hesitant, "there is a Marcus Johnson here to see you. He does not have an appointment." I told her to let him in. Marcus walked into my office not with anger, but with a new, unsettling, hollowed-out quiet. He looked exhausted. "I need to see it," he said, his voice low. "I need to understand." I did not say a word. I just nodded and walked him out onto the engineering floor. For 2 hours I let him wander. He was immediately almost magnetically drawn to Chloe and Jasmine. He stood at their desks, watching them work, his eyes scanning their monitors. He started asking questions. At first they were skeptical, almost hostile, but then the questions became more technical, more specific, more respectful. He was not the arrogant brother, he was the engineer. He was genuinely deeply impressed by their code, by their architecture. I watched him have a 30-minute rapid-fire whiteboard debate with Jasmine about API gateways and microservice architecture. I saw the exact moment his lifelong condescension shattered, replaced by a pure, undeniable professional respect. He finally saw the work. He called me 2 nights later. "I read the integration plan," he said, his voice stripped of all its old arrogance. "Your strategy for sunsetting the TechCore platform, it's brutal. But it's brilliant. It's the right move." He paused and I heard him take a deep, shaky breath. "The VP role, that's obviously gone. But Jasmine, she said you're looking for a director of core architecture, someone to manage the integration from my side." "I am," I said quietly. "I'll take it," he said. "I want to be a part of whatever this is. I want to build this, if you'll have me." My parents visited the office the following week. It was awkward, almost painful. My father, the proud computer scientist, walked through our bustling office like he was in a foreign country. He looked at the energy, the whiteboards, the 25 engineers, and he finally understood. He pulled me aside by the coffee machine. "Maya," he said, his voice thick. I am so proud of you. I never understood. I am so sorry." It was a clumsy, late, and absolutely vital apology. Marcus started the next Monday. Our relationship was not fixed, not in a personal family sense. Not yet. But we had something new. We had a foundation. We were no longer the genius and the artist. We were 2 executives, 2 strategists, finally after 32 years speaking the same language. We learned to collaborate, to respect each other's vision. And for the first time, that was enough. True success isn't measured by external validation, especially from those unwilling to see your worth. It's forged in the quiet dedication to your own vision. When you build your path authentically, you redefine not just your future, but the dynamics around you, proving that different kinds of brilliance shine equally bright.